Hi guys, thank you for showing interest and listening to my presentation. Imagine you're under pressure. The stress is overwhelming and your chest is tightening. Your heart is pounding in your throat. What do? My topic relates to SDG 3, good health and well-being. The reason I chose this topic is because I personally know someone with autism and I wanted to know more about autism and how people with autism experience things, like a stressful situation. In this presentation, I will talk about my research, action, and reflection on a global issue important to me. My central idea: respect and bias affect support in different countries for people with ASD. In this research project, I explored 3 lines of inquiry. Let's start. This is what I learned. My first line of inquiry is: what is included on the spectrum for neuroatypical people? The key concept I focused on for this was form. What is it like? The questions I had were: what is autism? What are the different intensities in which autism can occur? What is it like to have autism? What are symptoms of autism? How is autism diagnosed? And how are symptoms of autism treated? Well, to have a proper understanding of autism, you surely need a definition. This is what my first LOI focuses on: what it's like, what autism is like, and what it's like to have autism. Autism spectrum disorder, ASD, is not a disease. People are born with it. There are different types of autism or ASD, but they all affect people's neurological development. Development is how you grow. Neurological means how we use our 5 senses: taste, touch, smell, sight, sound to experience the world as well as control our body to react to it. For example, when you touch hot tea and burn your tongue, your nervous system is reacting to the feeling by jerking away. In children with ASD, you can see it in symptoms like difficulty socializing, different behaviors than what's expected, having a hard time going from one activity to another, hyperfocus. People with ASD might have difficulty expressing themselves non-verbally without talking, for instance, with eye contact, expressions in the voice, gestures, and facial expressions. Children on the spectrum might have difficulty having social interactions with other children and can be seen through interactions like them jabbering on or different forms of communication. Other symptoms may be struggling to reply to others or to their name, or an awkwardness towards social games and a general lack of interest in others. Stimming is something people with ASD do, and it means that people with ASD can do repetitive movements that regulate, control their feelings. The quicker ASD is diagnosed, the more support the person with ASD can get. Most people with ASD don't get diagnosed until after their 4th birthday, but symptoms can be noticed before the child is 1, and a trustworthy specialist can make a diagnosis when a child is 18 months old. Children with milder ASD are probably going to be diagnosed later. Eye trackers are being tested to diagnose ASD at even younger ages rather than the normal clinical tests and others. In San Diego, Dr. Karen Pierce has been trying to predict if children have autism and diagnose them early on, and children usually get help at ages 1 to 2. The best ASD assessment is the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule made by Catherine Lord, PhD, and her coworkers. The UCSD, University of California, San Diego, Autism Center of Excellence are trying to develop new diagnostics for autism right now based on working brain activity, eye tracking, and genetic profile, special parts of a person's DNA. If parents are nervous about their child, they can't put it off and should immediately ask for advice from a children's doctor, then go to a specialist for more details, or if they don't trust the original diagnosis. There is no specific treatment for ASD, and there are many ways to improve a child's symptoms, like special therapies and medicines to rein in symptoms or improve them. It's more difficult for adults with ASD to get treatment because much of the research done is for children and teens. Many adults with ASD also probably have some other condition like depression, anxiety, or ADHD, so they might need psychotherapy. For children with ASD, there are many different therapies, and many parents don't know what's right for their child but want the best for them. If the child with ASD has different conditions, they should go to a physician, a special doctor that doesn't focus on surgery. People think natural therapies, where you go into nature for therapy, is good, but it doesn't have backing from scientists, even though some people said that their child with ASD improved symptoms after a special diet. What parents need to know is if their child has a healthy diet. Treatments that are supposed to quote unquote cure ASD are untrue. Behavioral therapy is the most often used approach to helping children with ASD. Behavioral therapy is for social skills, even though others think it's for untamable children. Children with ASD have a lot of energy, so good activities can help their energy be lessened, and practical activities are good for calming down and positive behavior. At checkups, the doctor should check for symptoms of ASD, and if there are some symptoms, there should be a proper and thorough examination. Some children with ASD can make their symptoms better, even though ASD is generally supposed to be with you for life. Some people may even seem like they don't have ASD at all. We don't know whether the people who grew out of ASD truly did or if they just did really well in therapy. Also, we can be extremely sure that these people have a correct diagnosis, and we don't know who will grow out of ASD, but people with milder forms of ASD and are also in the special therapies will probably have a better result. My second line of inquiry is, what are the different causes of autism? My key concept was causation. Why is it as it is? I had merely two questions for this line of inquiry, which are, what do people think causes autism and what can cause autism? Now that you know what ASD is, I think we should focus on what causes ASD. Unfortunately, there is no one common true cause of ASD, but here are some possible causes. An analysis looked at all the studies of brain images of people with ASD cements the fact that the ASD involves making the brain larger by an important amount, especially when people with ASD are young. The discovery that after the early brain overgrowth, there was a time of slower growth was made by Dr. Korchesny and his coworkers. Also, the parts of the brain that are thought to be important to the symptoms of autism are amygdala, which handles emotion, superior temporal gyrus, which is involved with language, and the frontal lobes that help with understanding, knowledge, communication, and social and emotional understanding. ASD might be caused or helped by gene mutations. Gene mutations are a change in your genes, which is a short part of your DNA, that are the strands that make up your body. Roughly 50 of these genes exist, but are very rare. The most common of them is CHD8, found in 4 out of 1,000 people on the spectrum. 30 to 45% of risk of autism can come from gene variations that are common, and 30 to 45% comes from the prenatal, before the baby is born, environment. A shocking breakthrough made by Dr. Korchesny is that a specific brain cell called microglia shows that the ASD brain is in a neuroinflammatory inflammation, which is when your body gives out chemicals that make the body think there's an infection happening in your brain or spine, process in young children like 2-year-olds. Moving to a different study, in Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard Medical School studied the brains of young men who have ASD, and they found out that there's less of a specific protein that is important for when the body is in pain and the process of living, called TSPO. Zurcher found that the men with ASD actually had lower levels of TSPO, and the men who had a more intense version of ASD had the lowest amounts of TSPO despite the high levels of TSPO's connection to neuroinflammation and in turn ASD. Nicole Zurcher is the one conducting this study. Zurcher repeated the test months later and the same thing happened. The areas of the brain that have low TSPO levels of TSPO are related to ASD and social cognitive, how the brain understands things, abilities like how you understand emotions and facial expressions, as well as empathy, the ability to put yourself into others' shoes, and being able to understand others' experiences. This shows that TSPO doesn't just mark neuroinflammation. TSPO serves many different purposes and can be helpful to a healthy brain because TSPO is needed for the powerhouses of the cell, mitochondria, that make the cell's energy, and mitochondria that work badly can relate to ASD. Dead people who had ASD's brains will be donated for Zurcher and her colleagues to study. They're trying to figure out which cells in the brain of a person on the spectrum's brain might have the faulty mitochondria. Also, this is happening while there's neuroinflammation and other things to cause ASD. Zurcher said that there are new theories being created based on the study and that they need to do more research. Now to understand genetics, how your family passes traits onto you. There's a missing piece in genetics relating to ASD. Copy number mutations, large changes to our genes, can happen randomly, and that explains simplex families, families with only one child with ASD. And Michael Wigler, PhD, and his colleagues also thought that there might be new gene mutations that they couldn't detect in important genes, so they searched and found them. Multiplex families, families with more than one child with ASD, showed that boys get ASD more often than girls, 50%, because women are more resistant to ASD. This means that the mother could carry the gene mutation and still not have ASD, but can pass it on to their male children. There thought that there would be more of the mom in the children with ASD, but they found more of the dad in the children. This happened in 2018, so it took them 2 to 3 years to fix their data, but that still hasn't been solved. Siblings are more likely to have ASD. Additionally, identical twins have a 90% chance of both having ASD, and it shows different ways to inherit ASD. Also, parents that have children older have a higher risk of having children with ASD. The unified theory of autism is what this theory is called. My third and final line of inquiry is, how do different countries compare with support for people with ASD? This relates to the key concept of perspective. What are the points of view? The questions I had were, what are the stigmas different countries have about people with ASD? What are the reasons for these stigmas? What are misconceptions about people who have ASD? What are the reasons for these misconceptions? As I'm sure you're well aware of, we live in Indonesia, and I was interested in doing some research into how our own country relates to ASD, so this LOI focuses on misconceptions about ASD in the world, the most respectful terms for people with ASD, and how different countries support people with ASD. ASD, a misconception about ASD is that it can be cured, which is untrue, but people with ASD can improve their symptoms. ASD is also seen in girls, not just boys. Even though ASD is more common in boys, it doesn't make girls who have ASD less valid, accepted as a person. Shall we move on to a myth about what causes ASD? Measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine don't cause ASD. The studies that suggested that weren't correct. I also focused on the most respectful terms for people with ASD. The terms high functioning and low functioning are used to describe how intense autism is in a person. Many people with autism feel like it makes people who are high functioning get less attention and support, and that can eventually lead to them cracking. And people who are low functioning are underestimated, thinking someone is less important, even when they can be very intelligent and the terms are too simple, because people's needs change over time and there are many different parts to a person. Finally, to understand how different countries support people with autism. The US autism support system isn't perfect, but they have government support and professionals who have experience helping people with ASD, and the system is competent. In contrast, Indonesia is only starting to give support to people with ASD throughout the country. Kunthi Hardy is an MD in Applied Behavior Analysis from the University of Washington's Department of Education and co-founded Anak Istimewa Indonesia Foundation, Yasaindo, which is which is a nonprofit organization that helps children with special needs in Indonesia get inclusive education. A program of the organization is called Behavior Pals and helps children on the spectrum by assessing them and getting the right help they need. Kunti is one of the few board certified behavioral analysts in Indonesia, and she works with parents to find out which interventions are necessary and how to accomplish them. Kunti said that it's more difficult to find supplies and care for children with autism in Indonesia than in the US. Indonesian people are with children who are on the spectrum have more difficulty finding good therapists and programs, and when they find them, they usually cannot pay using insurance. Schools have started to become aware of the lack of support that children on the spectrum have and have started providing break rooms, psychologists, and teachers' assistants. Most universities in Indonesia don't give degrees or certificates for special education and occupational therapists, so finding proper help for children with ASD can be difficult. Parents or on other islands or generally outside of Jakarta have trouble finding the correct therapy and have to travel to Java or other cities. When it's more extreme, some parents go to experts internationally, but that cannot happen a lot, nor can many people afford it. Local communities are presenting challenges towards parents who have children on the spectrum because a majority, most, of people in Indonesia don't know much about ASD and can see children with ASD as stupid and unable to learn, also blame the parents. It is understandable that Indonesia has not given children with ASD the support they need because we have many difficulties, so the government wouldn't be able to come up with competent support systems for children with ASD. And even though families and schools get support, sometimes people need to be more aware towards children on the spectrum's needs relating to their education. In America, people with ASD actually have federal agencies, organizations, and the government that support them. But in Indonesia, people only have organizations and charities that are independent on their own from the government. Multi-agency task force on increasing employment opportunities for Americans with disabilities is part of the Administration for Community Living as well as the RAISE Family Caregiving Advisory Council, FCAC, and it was established in April 2018 to help fix the fact that Americans with disabilities are often unemployed, and it also has 11 agencies within it that help too. The Interagency Committee on Disability Research, ICDR, helps order departments that relate to disability, how to live without others supporting you, and research on how to bounce back after something traumatic, as well as organizing how the departments work together. For Indonesia, the organizations are Yayasan Sayap Ibu, which helps protect and care for children with disabilities with love in and outside their orphanage in a professional manner and helps them be independent, which is the organization's vision. An activity this organization offers is that in the Banten headquarters of the Sayap Ibu Foundation, The children are learning how to grow vegetables in the orphanage courtyard. Up next is my action. For my taking action section, I wanted to inspire change in the world. My idea was to use survey results to draw images about sensory issues. For my action, I plan to make a survey and use the results to make a sketch of a sensory experience, but I had to pivot because I only got 2 responses from people with autism, and I thought that the illustration would be more manageable using my responses, and the emotion aspect would make my action more personal. I also did it because I wanted to use my skills to promote my topic, as well as the fact that I think my action is unique and interesting. This is a mix of research and advocacy, which are both different types of action. To promote my action, I made a poster which was put up on these large blackboards in the lobby, and created a section on my website about my action that included my poster. I am proud that I was able to go class to class because speaking in front of the MYP students was terrifying and I was very anxious, but I had to push through it. I also had to type up a blurb and figure out which class to go to, which was mildly difficult and also stressful. I went to 3 classes to promote my action, and Miss Irene and Ibudea told their friends about my survey, as well as a toddle and WhatsApp announcement by Mr. Dan. Miss Irene and Ibudea spreading the word was very helpful, and I got many responses, but barely any from people with ASD. So I emailed 3 nonprofit organizations called Empatis, Yayasan Sayap Ibu, and YAE, Yayasan Autisma Indonesia, and asked them to share the survey. Thanks to over 50 responses to my survey, I was able to get my action done to the best of my ability. This was so helpful to my research and supporting me, my SDG, and my PYPx. If I had 4 more weeks, my action could make an even bigger difference if I messaged the organizations earlier, went to more classes, and interviewed more people with autism. Up next is any questions. These are my research notes. And this is a section where the audience can ask questions if they have any.